right.
They never do that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. And welcome to our banned books readout. Yes, I'm Zahara Simmons, a member of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship's Social Justice Circle. And it was our group that initiated the planning for this event. I want to also thank our sponsors, the Links Independent Bookstore, the NAACP Alachua County Branch, Gainesville Quakers, Veterans for Peace, and Jewish Voices for Peace, Gainesville chapter. And of course, I want to thank our banned book readers, our musicians, and our technical staff support. Thank you all. Why are we here today? I hope many of you saw the banner headline in last Sunday's Gainesville Sun. It said, "Banned." I couldn't have been happier, given that I knew we would be here today. The article begins by telling us that Florida has had more books challenged for removal than any other state in the United States. Are we surprised, friends?
No.
Nearly 2,700 titles were targeted in 2023 alone for restrictions or removal from public and school libraries. Significantly, this is 1,200 more books than the state with the second largest challenge, Texas. So
that's true.
Florida has the shame of being number one by a whole lot. You may know that banned books, including getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in our schools and universities, as well as restrictions or removal of African American women and gay rights studies programs across the state. This is a dangerous infringement on free speech and our right to the knowledge and history of the movements for social and economic justice in our country. Most of the books and authors targeted by these conservatives' book bans are African American and other racially oppressed groups, Native Americans, Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans. Also, of course, targeted are women's studies, lesbian, gay, and transgender studies. It is important to know that these books and programs that have been targeted grew out of social movements in our country to end discrimination against these groups. African American studies grew out of the civil rights and Black Power movements, and I am proud that I was a part of that movement to get African American studies in our colleges and high schools. And women's studies grew directly out of the women's liberation movement. And people like DeSantis wants to keep this information hidden from our children and all of us, because public libraries are targeted. These organizations and individuals who are pushing for these bans often claim that Euro-American children's feelings are hurt when they learn about slavery and the racial discrimination practiced in our country against African Americans, Native Americans, and other people of colors. Others claim that learning the history of our country leads to hatred of our country. As a retired professor from UF who taught African American studies, and women's studies, by the way, this is the opposite of what I witnessed. Learning about the past wrongs of our nation didn't turn students against the nation, it turned them against racism, sexism, homophobia, and the like. We are here today speaking out against the banning of books that tell the true history of our country and document the experiences of all those who suffered from these oppressions in the past and currently. So, it is my great pleasure to bring to the podium the beautiful voices of Gainesville's own residents, the wonderful a cappella assembly. Welcome.
Okay, good afternoon. So our first song is going to be on children. These words were written by the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran from The Prophet, and the musical setting is by Issei Barnwell, a longtime member of Sweet Honey in the Rock. And like the words that will be read as part of this program today, The Prophet has been banned in some countries like Egypt and Malaysia, that I'm aware of. And book banners often target children's books. And the words of this poem are a powerful reminder that we don't control the children, and the attempt to do so is really quite futile.
Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life, longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, no, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life, longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, no, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you.
Wow, let's give them another hand. each of our readers, when they start, to please introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about why they picked the particular banned book they are reading from. So we welcome to the podium Lauren Gruff from the Lynx bookstore. She's reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
I just have to do this. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm Lauren. You may know me. I'm sorry, I have to do this or else the winds can make a fool of me. I am here not in my guise as a writer, but in my guise as a bookstore owner. We opened the Lynx because we were galvanized by these book bannings that were happening all over the state. We're a general interest bookstore with an emphasis on LGBTQIA plus books, banned books, Florida books, books by BIPOC people, books that actually teach history. And so please come. We're in our soft opening right now, but our grand opening is the 28th. Starting at 10 with the ribbon cutting. So here is The Bluest Eye. It is one of the top 10 most banned books in this country, in this state. And this is egregious if you know of Toni Morrison's work. She is one of the best writers we have ever produced in this continent. She is a Nobel laureate. And to take these books away from people who need them is frankly horrific. So I'm going to read a little bit from almost the beginning, a little bit from the beginning. Nuns go by as quiet as lust, and drunken men with sober eyes sing in the lobby of the Greek hotel. Rosemary Villanucci, our next door friend who lives above her father's cafe, sits in a 1939 Buick eating bread and butter. She rolls down the window to tell my sister Frida and me that we can't come in. We stare at her, wanting her bread, but more than that, wanting to poke the arrogance out of her eyes and smash the pride of ownership that curls her chewing mouth. When she comes out of the car, we will beat her up, make red marks on her white skin, and she will cry and ask, do we want her to pull her pants down? We will say no. We don't know what we should feel or do if she does, but whenever she asks us, we know she is offering us something precious, and that our own pride must be asserted by refusing to accept. School has started, and Frida and I get new brown stockings and cod liver oil. Grown-ups talk in tired, edgy voices about Zick's Coal Company and take us along in the evening to the railroad tracks where we fill burlap sacks with the tiny pieces of coal lying about. Later, we walk home, glancing back to see the great carloads of slag being dumped, red hot and smoking, into the ravine that skirts the steel mill. The dying fire lights the sky with a dull orange glow. Frida and I lag behind, staring at the patch of color surrounded by black. It is impossible not to feel a shiver when our feet leave the gravel path and sink into the dread grass in the field. Our house is old, cold, and green. At night, a kerosene lamp lights one large room. The others are braced in darkness, peopled by roaches and mice. Adults do not talk to us. They give us directions. They issue orders without providing information. When we trip and fall down, they glance at us. If we cut or bruise ourselves, they ask us, are we crazy? When we catch colds, they shake their heads in disgust at our lack of consideration. How, they ask us, do you expect anybody to get anything done if you are all sick? We cannot answer them. Our illness is treated with contempt, foul black draft, and castor oil that blunts our minds. When, on a day after a trip to collect coal, I cough once loudly through bronchial tubes already packed tight with phlegm, my mother frowns. Great Jesus, get in on that bed. How many times do I have to tell you to wear something on your head? You must be the biggest fool in this town. Frida, get some rags and stuff that window. Frida restuffs the window. I trudge off to bed full of guilt and self-pity. I lie down in my underwear. The metal in my black garters hurts my legs, but I do not take them off, for it is too cold to lie stockingless. It takes a long time for my body to heat its place in the bed. Once I've generated a silhouette of warmth, I dare not move, for there is a cold place 1/2 inch in any direction. No one speaks to me or asks how I feel. In an hour or two, my mother comes. Her hands are large and rough, and when she rubs the Vicks salve on my chest, I am rigid with pain. She takes 2 fingers full of it at a time and massages my chest until I am faint. Just when I think I will tip over into a scream, she scoops out a little of the salve on her forefinger and puts it in my mouth, telling me to swallow. A hot flannel is wrapped around my neck and chest. I am covered up with heavy quilts in order to sweat, which I do, promptly. All right, I'm going to end there. Thank you, everybody. Oh, where the store is, yes, it's actually only a few blocks away. It's down on South Main Street in South Main Station, right across the street from Depot Park, right next to the fire station. Yes, right there on Main Street. And we're open.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Our next reader is Judith Weaver, a retired librarian, and she's reading from Z is for Zachariah.
This book was originally written by Robert O'Brien, writing under the pseudonym Robert O'Brien. He was also the winner, the Newbery Award winner for Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim and the Silver Crown, 2 Newberys. He died before this book was finished, and his wife and daughter finished it for him. It won the Edgar Award, which is for mysteries. And while this is not about history, it is definitely about a topic that our children need to think about. All people do. While it was written originally, he wanted it to be an adult book. It ended up being read by many middle school kids and librarians, and even high school kids. So I selected this book. I heard a great quote recently about a Roman general who was sent to pacify a group of rebels, and he wiped out every man, woman, and child, returned to Rome. And it was said that he created devastation and called it peace. And so this book is about war. May 20th, I am afraid someone is coming. That is, I think someone is coming, though I'm not sure, and I pray that I'm wrong. I went into the church and prayed all this morning. I sprinkled water in front of the altar and put some flowers on it, violets and dogwood. But there is smoke. For 3 days, there's been smoke, not like the time before. That time last year, it rose in a great cloud a long way away and stayed in the sky for 2 weeks, a forest fire in the dead woods. And then it rained and the smoke stopped. But this time, it is a thin column, like a pole and not very high. And the column has come 3 times, each time in the late afternoon. At night, I cannot see it, and in the morning, it is gone. But each afternoon, it comes again, and it's nearer. At first, it was behind Claypole Ridge, and I could see only the top of it, the smallest smudge. I thought it was a cloud, except that it was too gray, the wrong color, and I thought, there are no clouds anywhere else. So I got the binoculars and saw that it was narrow and straight. It was smoke from a small fire. When we used to go in the truck, Claypole Ridge was about 15 miles, though it looks closer, and the smoke was coming in behind that. Beyond Claypole Ridge, there's Ogden Town, about 10 miles farther, but there's no one left alive in Ogden Town. I know because after the war ended and all the telephones went dead, my father, my brother Joseph, and my cousin David went in the truck to find out what was happening. The first place they went to was Ogden Town. They went early in the morning. Joseph and David were really excited, but Father looked serious. When they came back, it was dark. Mother had been worrying they took so long, so we were glad to see the truck lights finally coming over Burden Hill, 2 miles away. They looked like beacons. They were the only lights anywhere except in the house. No other cars had been down all day. We knew it was the truck because one of the lights, the left one, always blinked when it went over a bump. It came up to the house and they got out. The boys weren't excited anymore. They looked scared, and my father looked sick. Maybe he was beginning to be sick, but mainly I think he was distressed. My mother looked up at him as he climbed down. What did you find? He said, bodies, just dead bodies. They're all dead. All? We went inside the house where the lamps were lit, the 2 boys following, not saying anything. My father sat down. Terrible, he said. And again, terrible, terrible. We drove around looking. We blew the horn. Then we went to the church and rang the bell. You can hear that 5 miles away. We waited 2 hours, but nobody came. I went in a couple of houses, the Johnsons, the Peters. They were all in there, all dead. There were dead birds all over the streets. My brother Joseph began to cry. He was 14. I think I had not heard him cry for 6 years. May 21st. It is coming closer. Today, it was almost on top of the ridge, though not quite, because when I looked with the binoculars, I could not see the flame, but still, only the smoke rising very fast, not far above the fire. I know where it is. It's at the crossroads, just on the other side of the ridge, the east-west highway, the Deantown Road, where it crosses our road. It is Route number 9, a state highway bigger than our road, which is County Road 793. He has stopped there and decided whether to follow number 9 or come over the ridge. I say he because that is what I think of, though it could be they or even she, but I think it's he. If he decides to follow the highway, he will go away and everything will be all right again. Why would he come back? But if he comes to the top of the ridge, he is sure to come down here because he will see the green leaves. On the other side of the ridge, even on the other side of Burden Hill, there are no leaves. Everything is dead. There are some things I need to explain. One is why I'm afraid. Another is why I'm writing in this composition book, which I got from Klein's store a mile up the road. I took the book and a supply of ballpoint pens back in February. By then, the last radio station, a very faint one that I could hear only at night, had stopped broadcasting. It had been dead for about 3 or 4 months. I say about, and that is one reason I got the book, because I discovered I was forgetting when things happened, and sometimes even whether things happened or not. Another reason I got it is that I thought writing in it might be like having someone to talk to, and if I read it back later, it would be like someone talking to me. But the truth is I hadn't written in it much at all because there wasn't much to write about. Sometimes I would put in what the weather was like. If there was a storm or something unusual, I put in when I planted the garden because I thought that would be useful to know next year. But most of the time I didn't write because one day was just like the day before, and sometimes I thought, what's the use of writing anyway when nobody's ever going to read it? Then I would remind myself, sometime, years from now, you're going to read it. I was pretty sure I was the only person left in the world. But now I have something to write about. I was wrong. I'm not the only person left in the world, and I'm both excited and afraid. At first, when all the others went away, I hated being alone, and I watched the road all day and most of the night, hoping that a car, anybody, would come over the hill from either direction. When I slept, I would dream that one came and drove on past without knowing I was here, and then I would wake up and run to the road looking for the taillight disappearing. And then the weeks went by and the radio stations went off one by one. When the last one finally went off and stayed off, it came to me finally that nobody, no car, was ever going to come. Of course, I thought it was the batteries in my radio that had run down, so I got new batteries from the store. I tried them in the flashlight. I'd like to read just the last sentence here. So she's decided that this person that's coming could be good, bad, or anything else, right? I'm trying to find the exact spot. She says she's figured out that there are some things worse than being alone, and she's waiting to see who this person is that's coming to her valley. So it's a very interesting book, and it's easy read, and I was surprised when I found out he had been banned, because not in the most current list, but in the past, but it's not a super popular book, and it might have been one had anybody not banned it. But it is a thoughtful book. Let's just put it that way. It's food for thought for anyone who reads it.
Thank you so much. You know, when I was mentioning books that are being banned, another group of books are books that tell the truth about war. And that's something else that the powers that be often don't want us to think about, in spite of the fact that so many of our tax dollars are going into the war machine. Okay, next we have Kathy Sarachild, and I just want to correct, she is not a founder of NOW, but she is definitely a founder of the women's liberation movement. Thank you.
Thank you for asking me to do this. I've learned more from doing it than I expected to. Even though my mother was an artist, and I was named after the artist Katie Kollwitz, whose work I'm going to be showing a few samples of. I think I'm here as a representative of feminism to include history of women's work being banned outright, meaning in this case legal banning, outright prohibition, as opposed to the more covert and everyday kind of banning that women face when women and their work and words and political movements are just omitted by gentlemen's agreement, as it were. Of course, women are not the only group long considered second class and inferior that banning just by omission happens to. But today in Florida, we're dealing with the problem of outright banning, an effort to reverse the progress that's been made by the Black movement, the women's movement, and the gay movement. I'm going to show, not read, a few examples of this outright banned women's work. Katie Kollwitz, of German nationality. Kollwitz was one of the few women artists of the late 19th and early 20th century who received tremendous recognition in her lifetime. Truly world recognition. For instance, a book of her prints was published as far away as China in the 1930s by the father of modern Chinese literature, Lu Xun. The first exhibition of her work in the United States was in the New York Public Library in 1900. Katie Kollwitz was world famous, but exhibitions of her work were banned in Nazi Germany, and earlier too, during the German Empire. Though she was not Jewish and not one of the abstract modern artists who the Nazis called, quote, degenerate, unquote, who they also banned. In fact, her work was not even allowed in the exhibit of what the Nazis called degenerate art that they held in a big publicity stunt at one point. Katie Kollwitz's work, as you'll see, was very realistic, not abstract and modern at all, undoubtedly too realistic for the Nazis. She was very involved in the socialist movement and portrayed working class people, women, men, and children, in their suffering from the pauperization and class oppression happening to them, but also in revolt and resistance to these conditions. Okay, this is a self-portrait. She did quite a number of self-portraits, and this book is easily available, actually, to get through Dover Publications. And also, if you Google her name, you can learn quite a bit about her. I want to add, before I show some of her work, that there was a very important part of Katie Kollwitz's work for women's liberation that I knew very little about, because it was omitted by this book and has been omitted from other, and had been omitted from other books by Kollwitz I had seen. This is her work in the movement for birth control and abortion rights before World War II, and during the Weimar Republic after World War II, before Hitler came to power. This work was, of course, banned by Hitler, along with all her other work. But even now, her more explicitly feminist work is appearing almost nowhere. In some cases, I'm sure, but by deliberate omission, and in other cases by people simply not knowing about it. Okay, I hope, oh, thanks. I hope these markers don't fall out. This is an example of her work during around 1900. This one, I'll try to show everyone, this one is a riot. As you can see, white people in Germany, or poor white people in Germany, are rioting, trying to break through a fence. And women and men are both involved in the crowd. And down, it's called Riot, and down here is a shot of a poor couple bringing their dead child, I'm assuming, into a morgue. It's called The End, and all the bodies are lying in the morgue. already losing some of them, losing my markers. Oh, here. I wanted to show, but I can't seem to find the mark. Oh, here it is. Okay, great. This is a shot. She did a lot of self-portraits. And why am I holding this up? It doesn't look like a self-portrait. It's called The Mothers, and it's a peace protest. After World War I, she herself is right here in this mass protest, holding her two sons, one of whom had just been killed in World War I. And I think you can get an idea of how powerful her work is. Down below, this is a woodcut of for the funeral of Karl Liebknecht, who was a communist revolutionary who was murdered by the new government in Germany. This is before Hitler in 1919. This one down here. Okay, now I lost the one I wanted to show. I lost the place for it. As I said, these pages aren't numbered, so I'll just tell you about it, and then I'll show you the last one.
Mike,
Then I'll just tell you about this one since I lost the place the marker is supposed to be. But it shows the love and joy in working class families despite all the hardship. She had a wonderful way, not just of showing hardship, but of showing the love, and especially family love in working class families. Unfortunately, that's the one that got lost, that got fallen out, but you can see a little bit of it here in this last one I want to show. These last two, which are from the 30s. This one on this side shows women chatting. It's called Women Chatting. And they're caring for their children, but they're obviously enjoying each other's company as they care for their children. And it's kind of a really beautiful example of, the comradeship of women in their work. And then this was her very last print. It was made in 1942. She had already lost the son a grandson who was named after the son who was killed in World War II, had just been killed on the Russian front. He'd been drafted into the Nazi army. And this woman is holding children. And the name of this is, I think, very important. The name of it is Seed Corn. Seed corn must not be ground. And she's kind of appealing to the German people not to destroy their own seed corn for future Germany by sending the children off to war. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I certainly had not heard of this artist, but I absolutely want to see her work. Now we are fortunate to have residents come back and give us another song. Thank you, residents. Thank you, Kathy.
Hello, this is another song from Issei Barnwell of Sweet Honey in the Rock. This one is Harbor Me, and we've updated the lyrics a little bit. So the original subject was the Underground Railroad, but rather than focusing on the enslaved people who were escaping, it addressed those who helped them at great risk to themselves. Harbor Me.
Muslim, a Jew, a heretic, convict, or spy? Would you harbor a runaway woman or child, a poet, a prophet, a king? Would you harbor an exile or a refugee, a person living with AIDS? Would you harbor a Tubman, a Garrett, a Truth, a fugitive, or a slave? Would you harbor a Haitian, Ukrainian, or Czech, a lesbian, or a gay? Would you harbor a pagan, a black man, a Sikh, a dreamer, a witch, or a Kurd? Would you harbor a Guatemalteca, a trans, an atheist, or a Serb? Would you harbor an exile or a refugee, a person living with AIDS? Would you harbor a Tubman, a Garrett, a Truth, a fugitive, or a slave? Would you harbor a Haitian, Ukrainian, or Czech, a lesbian, or a gay? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor me?
Wow. Let's give them another round of applause. What a beautiful song. Especially, this song is so appropriate with all of the hatred being leveled against immigrants. And so the whole issue of harboring people who are fleeing for their lives or fleeing because they don't have food, what have you. This is so apropos for today. Okay, next we have Liz Stewart from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And you know that children's books, a lot of them are being banned. And so sing a song by Kelly Starlin.
I am a lifelong educator. After 45 years, I finally gave it up and I'm doing other things. But education's not far from my heart, and I'm totally honored to have been asked to read today. And when I looked at some of the choices, this book just stole my heart. It is based on a true story. The title is Sing a Song, How Lift Every Voice and Sing Inspired Generations. And I'll try and show the pictures. It's going to be kind of hard, but the illustrations by Keith Mallett are absolutely stunning. Before you were born, a girl learned a song. Her principal, James Weldon Johnson, and his brother, John Rosamond Johnson, had written the hymn for a celebration of President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. The girl wanted to make them proud. She hummed the song on her way home from school. She practiced it as she did her chores. On the big day, February 12th, 1900, she was part of a choir, 500 strong. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth open, she sang. till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. And she kept on singing as she grew up. She taught it to her students when she became a teacher. She crooned it to her husband as they journeyed from Jacksonville, Florida, to a new life in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She sang it when she rocked her baby boy to sleep. It was a part of her she wanted to pass on. And you know what? Her little boy learned that song. He listened to her hum it as she dreamed of being able to teach again in her new home. He heard his daddy sing it when the days at the steel mill wore him down. Then one day he stood in the choir loft and gazed at the glowing faces. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth open, he sang. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. And he kept on singing. He sang it when he came back from World War II and faced discrimination. He sang it when he joined the NAACP. He sang it with his wife and to his baby daughter as he rocked her to sleep. It was a part of him, and he wanted to pass it on. And you know what? His little girl learned that song. She sang it each morning at school. Then came a day that broke the nation's heart. Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. The next morning, she saw her teacher cry. Sobs replaced singing. Then whimpers and silence. Who would lead now? The song whispered an answer. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth open, she sang. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. And she kept on singing. She sang it at protests for equal rights, and when she and her friends were jailed. She sang that song in her heart each time she won or lost a case as a lawyer. She sang it to her baby boy as she rocked him to sleep. It was a part of her she wanted to pass on. And you know what? That little boy learned that song. Every family reunion opened with that anthem. He sang it because he had to at first. But then something changed. He saw the awe in his grandparents' faces, saw the pride in his mamas and pops. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth open, he sang. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. And he kept on singing. He sang it at his college graduation and when he opened his first business. He sang it at rallies to stand up against racism. He sang it holding his wife's hand at Black History programs and when he rocked his daughter to sleep. It was part of him that he wanted to pass on. And you know what? His little girl learned that song. And on another big day, September 24th,
2016, she stood in a crowd of thousands along with her mama and daddy. President Obama, the First Lady, and generations of one family rang the freedom bell. A dream born a century ago to honor Black lives and contributions had finally come true. The National Museum of African American History and Culture was finally open. With the Washington Monument piercing the sky, that little girl stared at the bronze building, majestic as a crown. As bells around the nation tolled in triumph, she heard a voice rising too, clear and strong. It was a song she heard her parents sing. Back straight, head high, heart and mouth open, she sang. Facing the sun of now our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. And do you know what? That song is part of you. Sing when you score a victory. Sing when the tough times get you down. Sing and think of all the people who sang before you, carried on and pushed forward, even when everything was against them. Sing and remember they never stopped believing. Keep singing, keep pushing, keep passing it on. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you so much. As a elder, I know I've been singing that song since it was taught to me for 70 years, and taught it to my daughter, and sang it in my classrooms, taught it in classrooms. So, the next reader is Dan Carmelie, and Dan is a member of the NAACP, and I know all of you know it's the oldest civil rights organization in the country. And Dan will be reading from the 1619 Project.
Thanks, Zahara. The name of the book is The 1619 Project. It's a book that is presently banned by evidently the Florida legislature, whoever is involved with this up in Tallahassee. I do want to point out to everybody right away that our library, the Alachua County Library, which is an independent tax district, and so we're in charge. We have 10 copies. I checked yesterday, about 4 of them are checked out. 2 additional audiobooks are available, as well as ebooks. So keep in mind, this is going to continue to be available here in Alachua County. Whatever's happening in the other 66 counties is not going to affect us here. We refuse to be censored by these misplaced, or I don't know what's going on with them. What I'm going to do is read one of the chapters, part of one of the chapters. The chapter is called Fear, written by 2 sisters, both of whom are well-known authors, African-American authors, Michelle and Leslie Alexander. This book contains 19 essays, 36 poems, as well as works of fiction. And so now I'm going to start reading. Here it starts. I'm reading a part of this chapter. Keep in mind the title of this is called Fear. Whose fear was it? Whose fear were they talking about? You'll hear these words, it won't be hard to figure out. Perhaps, after the Civil War, perhaps most disconcerting for white Southerners was the prospect of black people holding political power over white people, and thus gaining the opportunity to rewrite the rules, overturn exploitative economic arrangements, and redesign the social and political order. With the passage of the Reconstruction Act of 1867, followed by the 15th Amendment guaranteeing that the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged on the basis of race, an era of rising black power began. Black power. Black people voted in huge numbers across the South, electing a total of 16 black men to serve in the U.S. Congress, including 2 in the Senate. Literacy rates climbed, and educated black people began to populate state legislature, open schools, and initiate successful businesses. Tragically, the black freedom dreams that propelled swift progress toward equality were arrested by the late 1870s. Southern white people effectively nullified the post-civil rights amendments that were intended to dismantle the racial caste system in the South, including the 14th Amendment that was guaranteeing an equal protection of laws, as well as the 15th Amendment declaring the right to vote. A government agency, the Freedmen's Bureau, was created by Congress in 1865 and charged with the responsibility of providing food, clothing, and other forms of assistance to the destitute former enslaved people. This was dismantled, and a plethora of discriminatory practices such as poll taxes and literacy tests were employed to prevent black people from exercising their right to vote and gain political power. When these efforts proved insufficient to maintain complete control, white Southerners wielded their most effective weapon, vigilante violence and terrorism. I'm about to read another example that gives us some hope for the future, maybe here in this country. In 1898, for example, a group of white residents orchestrated a successful coup to overthrow the city governments in Wilmington, North Carolina. However, this was a home of a thriving black population. 4 years earlier, listen to this, the populist movement had joined with the Republican Party to form the Fusion Party, a political organization that managed to unite poor and working class white people, formerly enslaved people and their descendants, and liberal Republicans in a movement for economic justice. This racially diverse party defeated old guard politicians, many of whom were white supremacists and former Confederates, in a series of state and local elections, including in places like Wilmington. In response, of course, the disgruntled white establishment plotted a coup to regain power and reinstate white-only rule that culminated in the murder of black residents, burning of black neighborhoods, and the unveiling of what they called a white Declaration of Independence. This happened at a mass meeting led by a former congressman. Throughout the South now, local police forces were often made up of former slave patrollers and members of the Ku Klux Klan, and they adopted many of the same strategies that patrollers had employed, using the excuse of nightly curfews and vagrancy laws to control, harass, detain, and punish black citizens for daring to behave as though they were free. The Klan, operating extra-legally, openly murdered black people who violated the written and unwritten rules of white supremacy. That's the part of the chapter that I just finished reading. Thank you very much.
Dan didn't mention it, but the 1619 project, I think, reignited this banned books movement. I have not ever seen such hatred for a book as the 1619 project. So I hope if you haven't read it, please get a copy out of our library and read it. And I'm glad to know that we have not banned it here. Khalid Blunt is going to give us his beautiful voice in song.
We are number one. Number one in book banning. Can we brag about that? We are number one. Book banning in a badge of ignorance and superstitious xenophobia. Welcome to Fahrenheit 451. So, hang on to the world as it spins around. Just don't let the spin get you down. Things are moving fast. Hold on tight and you will last. Keep your self-respect, your living pride. Get yourself in gear. Keep your stride. Never mind your fears. Brighter days will soon be here. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Keep on walking tall, hold your head up high. Lay your dreams right up to the sky. Sing your greatest song, and you'll keep going on. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Hey, just wait and see, someday we'll all be free. It won't be long, with someday we'll all be free. Now, after great talk like this, you must go and do. Register this town, this county, as trafficking in banned books. Order them from somewhere. Better yet, go over there to your library. You have this list of titles. Get them in on interlibrary loan. Make this a trafficking place for banned books. Show what we are really about.
Well, we've all been told that Gainesville is a blue dot in a red state, and so we're not banning books here. All right, next, Carolyn Edwards, the Porter's Freedom School Group, and she will be reading from Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston.
Thank you. As introduced, my name is Carolyn Edwards, and although I am a Gainesville native, I was born and went to elementary and high school here. I left Gainesville for some 40 plus years and recently returned about 2 years ago. And there were 3 books, I just wanted to say there were 3 books that I was thinking about doing when I was asked to do this, and 2 of the other ones have been chosen by others, so I'm glad to see that The Bluest Eye and Sing a Song were chosen. Sing a Song is something that I will be using as part of the Porter's Quarters Freedom School, a fledgling effort to fight this notion of banned books and banning African and African American history, so I'm proud to be back in Gainesville. The book that I did choose is Their Eyes Were Watching God. And the reason I chose this, because it's personally and professionally, the cover even says it, there's no book more important to me than this one. If I were still teaching, in fact, I taught African American literature, women's literature, high school English, and every chance that I could, which was almost all of the time, I read from, I had my students read and study this book. So it's a personal and professional insult to me as an educator that someone would dare to ban this book. And just the beautiful language is what attracted me, aside from the fact that she's from Florida, and I could go on and on. But I'll read brief sections from chapter 1 and chapter 2. This is the very beginning. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing, until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women, forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. So from the beginning of this was a woman, and she had come back from burying the dead. Not the dead of the sick and ailing with friends at the pillow and the feet. She had come back from the sodden and the bloated, the sudden dead, their eyes flung wide open in judgment. The people all saw her come because it was sundown. The sun was gone, but he had left his footprints in the sky. It was the time for sitting on porches beside the road. It was a time to hear things and talk. These sitters had become tongueless, eyeless, earless conveniences all day long. Mules and other brutes had occupied their skins. But now the sun and the boss man were gone, so the skins felt powerful and human. They became lords of sounds and lesser things. They passed nations through their mouth. They sat in judgment. Seeing the woman as she was made them remember the envy they had stored up from other times. So they chewed up the back parts of their minds and swallowed with relish. They made burning statements with questions and killing tools out of laughs. It was mass cruelty. A mood came alive, words walking without masters, walking all together like harmony in a song. What's she doing coming back here in them overalls? Can't she find no dress to put on? Where that blue satin dress she left here in? Where all that money her husband took and died and left her? What that old 40-year-old woman doing with her hair swinging back down her back like some young gal? Where she left that young lad of a boy she went off with? Thought she was going to marry. Where he left her? What he done with all her money? Bet you he off with some gal so young she ain't even got no hairs. Why, she don't stay in her class. When she got to where she turned her face on the bander log and spoke, they scrambled a noisy good evening and left their mouths setting open and their ears full of hope. Her speech was pleasant enough, but she kept walking straight to her gate. The porch couldn't talk for listening. Now, this is a section, that was her triumphant return. This is a section from chapter 2 that talks about where it all began. Janie saw her life like a great tree in leaf, with the things suffered, things enjoyed, things done and undone. Dawn and doom was in the branches. She was stretched out on her back beneath the pear tree, soaking in the alto chant of the visiting bees, the gold of the sun and the panting breath of the breeze, when the inaudible voice of it all came to her. She saw a dust-bearing bee sink into the sanctum of a bloom. The thousand sister calyxes arched to meet the love embrace and the ecstatic shiver of the tree from root to tiniest branch, creaming in every blossom and frothing with delight. So this was a marriage. She had been summoned to behold a revelation. Then Janie felt a pain remorselessly sweet that left her limp and languid. After she got up from where she was and went over to the little garden field entire, she was seeking confirmation of the voice and vision, and everywhere she found and acknowledged answers, a personal answer for all other creations except herself. She felt an answer seeking her, but where, when, how? She found herself at the kitchen door and stumbled inside. In the air of the room were flies tumbling and singing, marrying and giving in marriage. When she reached the narrow hallway, she was reminded that her grandmother was home with a sick headache. She was lying across the bed asleep, so Janie tipped out the front door. Oh, to be a pear tree, any tree in bloom, with kissing bees singing of the beginning of the world. She was 16. She had glossy leaves and bursting buds, and she wanted to struggle with life, but it seemed to elude her. Where were her singing bees? Nothing on the place nor her grandmother's house answered her. She searched as much of the world as she could from the top of the front steps, and then went down to the front gate and leaned over to gaze up and down the road, looking, waiting, breathing, short with impatience, waiting for the world to begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Now we'll have Renaud Dawn, who will read a poem that I hope all of you heard when it was first delivered, The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman.
Okay, all right. Good evening, good afternoon, actually. I know the sun is hot. Thank you for being here. Just adjust a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right. This is a poem that I would normally not choose to read because I thought this is as friendly, non-threatening poem that you can get. And it wasn't what I would think when I think of revolution and radicalism. So I was totally surprised, like, what, this poem is actually banned? What were you thinking? So I'm gonna do my best to read it as threatened and ominous as I can. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always just this. And yet, the dawn is ours. Before we knew it, somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none. I had to change phone, sorry. Mine was dying. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieve, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together victorious. Not because we will never again be defeated, but because we will never again sow division. Scriptures tell us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we are to live up to our own time, the victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade, the hill we climb. If only we dare, it's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It is the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such terrifying hour, but within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we ask, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-ringed cities of the Midwest states. We will rise from the late Ream cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked U-South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called country, every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light. Only, if only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know why anybody thought that poem should be banned. I mean, that just shows you there's some insanity at work. Now we will be graced again with resonance. Thank you.
So we were delighted to see that there's a representative of the Gainesville Quakers speaking in the next segment, which fits perfectly because the next song we wanted to sing for you is a contemporary Quaker round, Building Bridges.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we can make such sweet harmony. I reach out bridges between our divisions, I reach out to voices, reach out to me. With all of our voices and reach out to visions, I reach out to voices, reach out to visions, I reach out to voices, reach out to visions. With all of our voices, such sweet harmony. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Yeah, go ahead.
Want to stand up and stretch? We have a few more wonderful readers, and we will end with songs. Next, we have Sherry Steiner, Vets for Peace. She reads from 365 Days by Ronald J. Glasser.
Hi, I'm Sherry Steiner, and Dr. Ronald Glasser was an Army doctor who treated the Vietnam War wounded, and he wrote about their experiences and his. The book was banned not because of the horrific events that he described so graphically, but because of profanity that the soldiers used. It was banned in Maine in 1981, but a high school senior took it to court, and the judge decided that the student was correct, that his First Amendment rights were being
violated, and he ordered the book to be put back in the library. So the official policy of measuring success in Vietnam was dead bodies, body count. My husband is a Vietnam veteran, and he was taught that if they killed 10 Vietnamese for every American that died, that they would win the war. And this resulted in a lot of dead people. The excerpt I'll read illustrates that policy. The platoon that Glasser describes was fighting the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, and many of them had been killed or wounded, and the lieutenant orders them to go back in to a big empty open field. Bitterly they got up, and the NVA let them get halfway across the field before they hit them. They had to pull back. A gunship coming in to help was hit, scattering itself over 200 meters of Nam. Airstrikes were finally called in, and then with gunships anchoring their flanks and artillery and rolling barrages, destroying the grove and cutting off any retreat, they moved out again. Another battalion was committed, and then another. In the heat of it all, more choppers, flying close support, were shot down. Finally, on the second day, what was left of the 35th NVA regiment left whatever it was they had been fighting for and simply disappeared. That afternoon, the Americans, slinging their weapons, began counting bodies. The brass flew in, and to show how pleased they were, okayed a policy of claiming a kill for every weapon found, even without a body. The exhausted troops, 18 and 19-year-old kids, ignored the congratulations and simply went on stacking the bodies, throwing them into countable piles. It was the chopper pilots, though, flying in and out of it, right through the center of an NVA regiment and losing 9 choppers, who summed up the bitterness of what had happened. At dusk of that last day of fighting, they flew in a flying crane and slung a great cargo net below it. After the counting, they helped the troopers throw the NVA bodies into the net. They filled the net quickly, and when it was filled, the crane, blowing up great clouds of dust, rose off the flat pockmarked paddy, and when the net had cleared the ground, the crane spun slowly around its center and, carrying its dripping cargo, moved off to drop the bodies on the path of the retreating NVA.
Women, blacks, Mexican Americans, gay people, they don't want us to read about the realities of war and the horror of it all, especially since we spend something like 60% of our budget on war making. Next, we'll have Louis Kervan. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's with the Religious Society of Friends. I don't know your book.
Hello, yeah, I'm with the Quakers. And I'm reading East of Eden, which I didn't know was banned. And I was surprised to learn it's been banned. And that's kind of why I chose it. I got this copy of East of Eden in high school, where I was forced to read it, but I ended up loving it, and it's a book that changed everything about me. I've dragged this copy from Grand Rapids, Michigan, to Gainesville, Florida, to New York City, to Washington, D.C., and then back to Gainesville again. And so I'm going to read a page I dog-eared when I was 17, the beginning of chapter 13. Sometimes a kind of glory lights up the mind of a man. It happens to nearly everyone. You can feel it growing or preparing like a fuse, burning towards dynamite. It is a feeling in the stomach, a delight of the nerves, of the forearms, The skin tastes the air, and every deep-drawn breath is sweet. Its beginning has the pleasure of a great stretching yawn. It flashes in the brain, and the whole world glows outside your eyes. A man may have lived all of his life in the gray, and the land in trees of him dark and somber. The events, even the important ones, may have trooped by, faceless and pale. And then the glory, so that a cricket's song sweetens his ears. The smell of the earth rises chanting to his nose, and dappling light under a tree blesses his eyes. Then a man pours outward a torrent of him, and yet he is undiminished. And I guess a man's importance in the world can be measured by the quality and number of his glories. It is a lonely thing, but it relates us to the world. It is the mother of all creativeness, and it sets each man separate from all other men. I don't know how it will be in the years to come. There are monstrous changes taking place in the world, forces shaping a feature whose face we do not know. Some of these forces seem evil to us, perhaps not in themselves, but because of their tendency is to eliminate other things we hold good. It is true that two men can lift a bigger stone than one man. A group can build automobiles quicker and better than one man, and bread from a huge factory is cheaper and more uniform. When our food, clothing, and housing are all born in the complication of mass production, mass method is bound to get into our thinking and to eliminate all other thinking. In our time, mass or collective production has entered our economics, our politics, and even our religion, so that some nations have substituted the idea collective for the idea God. This in my time is the danger. There is great tension in the world, a tension toward a breaking point, and men are unhappy and confused. At such a time, it seems natural and good to me to ask myself these questions. What do I believe in? What must I fight for? And what must I fight against? Our species is the only creative species, and it has only one creative instrument, the individual mind and spirit of a man. Nothing was ever created by two men. There are no good collaborations, whether in music, in art, in poetry, in mathematics, or in philosophy. Kind of wrong about that, but once the miracle of creation has taken place, the group can build and extend it, but the group never invents anything. The preciousness lies in the lonely mind of a man. And now the forces marshaled around the concept of the group have declared a war of extermination on that preciousness, the mind of man, by disparagement, by starvation, by repression, forced direction, and the stunning hammer blows of conditioning. The free roving mind is being pursued, roped, blunted, drugged. It is a sad suicidal course our species seems to have taken. In this I believe, that the free, exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for, the freedom of the mind to take any direction it wishes, undirected. And this I must fight against, any idea, religion, or government which limits or destroys the individual. This is what I am and what I am about. I can understand why a system built on a pattern must try to destroy the free mind, for that is one thing which can by inspection destroy such a system. Surely I can understand this, and I hate it, and I will fight against it to preserve the one thing that separates us from the uncreative beasts. If the glory can be killed, we are lost.
Thank you. I think what you said, you read that when you were 17 and it changed your way of thinking about things. And I think that points to why those closed-minded people, like the ones we have in Tallahassee, are so afraid of people reading things that they don't approve of, because their minds are closed and they want all of our minds to be as closed as are theirs. Thank you all for staying with us. You heard how many thousands of books have been challenged in the state of Florida. So we're just giving you some wonderful excerpts of some of them. And now we have Paul Ortiz, Vets for Peace, who will be our last reader. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm a member of Gainesville Veterans for Peace. I'm at that age where I'm constantly switching glasses back and forth. And so I did pick the right, I have my reading glasses, but what that means is I really can't see anyone. But I can see the text, so I think that's what we're here for. So the book that I'm reading out of is a book that has been banned in Gainesville. It's Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, or The Children's Crusade, A Duty Dance with Death. And exactly why it was banned, WUFT did a wonderful expose on this banning. Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five is one of the most frequently banned books in the United States of America because we are an imperial nation. We do war. We do war better than any other nation probably in the history of humanity. A year before he was assassinated, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "My country, the United States, is the most violent nation on earth." And unfortunately, nothing has changed. Right before I went up here, Brother Dan Harmling mentioned that people in power, it doesn't matter, liberals, conservatives, whatever, don't want younger people reading books like Slaughterhouse-Five because of its anti-war content. The passage that I'm going to read comes from the beginning of the book. And the personal reason for me reading this book, you can see my shirt. I'm a member of Veterans for Peace. We support an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. We support an end to apartheid in Palestine. We support liberation for all Palestinians, and in fact for all oppressed people all throughout the world. But when I was a child growing up in a town called Bremerton, Washington, everyone I grew up around had been in war. Not just in the military, but in war. So when you read things in textbooks like the Bataan Death March, Corregidor, the Battle of the Bulge, so on and so forth, for us as kids growing up in Bremerton, those weren't just names. Those weren't just multiple choice questions on our history exam. Those were traumatic experiences that our elders had went through. And one of the things in Veterans for Peace, we have a phrase called the cost of war. And we're constantly trying to educate everyone around us that the cost of war is paid by everyone. In Gaza, this is highlighted because the main people who pay the cost of war are children, are civilians. This is who we condemn to death and violence whenever we support war, no matter where it is. So the setting for this passage that I'm going to read from Slaughterhouse-Five, it takes place in 1964. Kurt Vonnegut was a survivor of the Dresden firebombing. He was an American POW. He was captured during World War II. And he was put on a burial detail after the firebombing. And it was a really horrific experience. And it took him a quarter of a century to write this book, to come to grips for what the violence, the terror, the death that he had seen in Dresden in World War II. So many years after the end of World War II, in 1964, the year I was born, Kurt Vonnegut and his two young daughters arrived at the home of his fellow World War II comrade and former prisoner of war, Bernard V. O'Hare. And the sun went down, and we had summer in an Italian place, and then I knocked on the front door of the beautiful stone house of Bernard V. O'Hare. I was carrying a bottle of Irish whiskey, like a dinner bell. I met his nice wife, Mary, to whom I dedicate this book. I dedicate it to Gerhard Mueller, the Dresden taxi driver, too. Mary O'Hare is a trained nurse, which is a lovely thing for a person to be. Mary admired the two little girls I brought, mixed them in with her own children, sent them all upstairs to play games and watch television. It was only after the children were gone that I sensed that Mary didn't like me, or didn't like something about the night. She was polite but chilly. "It's a nice cozy house you have here," I said, and it really was. "I fixed up a place where you can talk and not be bothered," she said. "Good," I said. And I imagined 2 leather chairs near a fire in a paneled room where 2 old soldiers could drink and talk. But she took us into the kitchen. She had put 2 straight back chairs at a kitchen table with a white porcelain top. That tabletop was screaming with reflected light from a 200-watt bulb overhead. Mary had prepared an operating room. She put only 1 glass on it, which was for me. She explained that O'Hare couldn't drink the hard stuff since the war. So we sat down. O'Hare was embarrassed, but he wouldn't tell me what was wrong. I couldn't imagine what it was about me that could burn up Mary so. I was a family man. I've been married only once. I wasn't a drunk. I hadn't done her husband any dirt in the war. She fixed herself a Coca-Cola, made a lot of noise, banging the ice cube tray in the stainless steel sink. Then she went into another part of the house, but she wouldn't sit still. She was moving all over the house, opening and shutting doors, even moving furniture around to work off anger. I asked O'Hare what I'd said or done to make her act that way. "It's all right," he said. "Don't worry about it. It doesn't have anything to do with you." That was kind of him. He was lying. It had everything to do with me. So we tried to ignore Mary and remember the war. I took a couple of belts of the booze I brought. We would chuckle or grin sometimes as the war stories were coming back, but neither one of us could remember anything good. O'Hare remembered one guy who got into a lot of wine in Dresden before it was firebombed, and we had to take him home in a wheelbarrow. It wasn't too much to write a book about. I remember 2 Russian soldiers who had looted a clock factory. They had a horse-drawn wagon full of clocks. They were happy and drunk. They were smoking huge cigarettes they had rolled in newspaper. That was about it for the memories. And Mary was still making noise. She finally came out in the kitchen again for another Coke. She took another tray of ice cubes from the refrigerator, banged it in the sink, even though there was already plenty of ice out. Then she turned to me, let me see how angry she was, and that anger was for me. She had been talking to herself, so what she said was a fragment of a much larger conversation. "You were just babies then." "What?" I said. "You were just babies in the war, like the ones upstairs." I nodded that this was true. We had been foolish virgins in the war, right at the end of childhood. "But you're not going to write it that way, are you?" This wasn't a question, it was an accusation. I don't know, I said. "Well, I know," she said. "You'll pretend you were men instead of babies, and you'll be played in the movies by Frank Sinatra and John Wayne, or some of those other glamorous, war-loving, dirty old men. And war will look just wonderful, so we'll have a lot more of them. And they'll be fought by babies, like the babies upstairs." So then I understood. It was war that made her so angry. She didn't want her babies or anybody else's babies killed in wars. And she thought wars were partly encouraged by books and movies. So I held up my right hand and I made her a promise. "Mary," I said, "I don't think this book of mine is ever going to be finished. I must have written 5,000 pages by now and thrown them all away. If I ever do finish it, though, I give you my word of honor. There won't be a part for Frank Sinatra or John Wayne." I'll tell you what I said. I'll call it the Children's Crusade. She was my friend after that. Thank you.
Really did cry.
Thank you. What an appropriate piece to end on as we watch the carnage happening in Gaza and Ukraine and Somalia and Sudan and the Congo and on and on. we human beings have not learned very much. We are going to have the privilege of hearing from residents, and then after residents, we'll hear from Kali Blunt, and that will end our program. Thank you all for coming, and again, thank you to our sponsors, and we have to give special thanks to Mary Barr and Joy Avery for all the work that they have done, and everyone who has come from Unitarian Fellowship to help us with this today. And thank you again to all of our readers. Thank you.
Okay, so today we have sung about our children and Harbor Me and about building bridges. We need some resolve, and nothing better to do that Gainesville style with a little Tom Petty. We invite you to sing with us if you feel like you'd like to. Near, 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 near,
Well, I won't back down. No one won't back down. You can stand me out on the gates of hell, but I won't back down. Gonna stand my ground, won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. I won't back down, baby. Do 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 do. There ain't no easy way out. Do do. I won't back down. I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I got just one life in a world that keeps on pushing me around. But I stand my ground, and I won't back down. I won't back down, baby. Do 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 do. There ain't no easy way out. Do do. I won't back down. I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. I will back down, baby. Do 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 do. There ain't no easy way out. Do do. I won't back down. I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. I won't back down, baby. Do 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 do. There ain't no easy way out. Do do. I won't back down.
That's all right.
Will stand my ground, and I won't back down. No, I won't back
Okay, I need your participation for this one too. And what I'm going to need you to do is to clap 5 times. Can you do that? When I do this, you go. Right? All right. Time is truly wasting. There's no guarantee, yeah. Smiles in the making. You gotta fight the powers that be. Got so many forces. Staying on the scene, yeah. Giving up all around me. Faces full of pain. I try to tell my story. They say I'm talking too loud. I keep on talking about it. I got the big run around. When I roll with the punches, I got knocked on the ground with all this well formed going down. I don't understand it. People want to see those that got the answers. Red tape in the way. Fat cats can take you in easy. That's just half the fun, they say. Keeping you from reading. Put you under my thumb. I try to tell my story. They say I'm talking too loud. I keep on talking about it. I got the big run around. When I roll with the punches, I got knocked on the ground by all this well-formed going down. If you and I can, we got the power. If you and I can, we got the power. If you and I can, we got the power. Fight it, fight the power. People, people, fight it, fight the power. People, people, fight it, fight the power. Yeah, fight. And think of all those people, think of those ones swimming the political waters in Tallahassee like sharks, waiting for the next thing they can attack.
So funny.